How's everybody doing? So today's video is just going to be a quick discussion on whether or not high-end guitars are worth it. I'm going to use my Les Paul Custom as an example. I've had this guitar now for 6 months. At the time I bought this with tax, it was $5,100, give or take, and now I think the same exact guitar with the price increases has gone up to $6,000 with tax, which seems like a whole lot of money to spend on a guitar. And so I'm going to address whether or not I think that is actually worth it now that I've had this guitar that I've always wanted for the last 6 months and I've been playing it. So to answer this question, whether or not it's worth it, I'm going to discuss something that I've heard in the community before, which talks about the law of diminishing returns, meaning at a certain point, the more you spend, the less you get back. The more you spend, the less you get back. So you do get a return as you spend more, but it's less and less the more you spend. That's basically what that means. So if you buy a guitar that's $700, it's going to be sort of a mid-price, mid-level guitar that you would expect. If you buy a guitar that's $1,200, it's going to be maybe 10 or 20% better than that $700 guitar. Then if you go up to $1,800, $2,000, $2,200, $2,500, you're going to be getting something that's maybe 20% better than that $1,200 guitar. But as you go past, and this is just general rules, I'm not going to talk about any specific brands really, except I might use Gibson as an example because I'm familiar with their lineup. But typically speaking, as you go past $2,000, $2,500, $3,000, you're getting back very little as far as measurable difference in performance on the guitar. I mean, depending on the brand, you can get back a lot more visually as far as visual appointments and trim and tops and binding and inlays and all kinds of stuff like that. Those would be items that are labor intensive or just very high quality expensive materials that add to the cost. But the performance of the guitar is going to only increase very slightly as you pass about that $3,000 mark. And really, truthfully, that's exactly what we see here with this guitar. So this is my favorite guitar ever, Les Paul Custom. It's 2021, I've had it for 6 months, got it brand new. This guitar, I can confirm, is I will say, definitely one of the best sounding guitars that I've ever heard. And it is definitely, easily the best playing guitar that I've ever played, as far as how the frets feel, just the overall experience and how soft and just fluid it feels to play. It's very, very, very refined, which you would really hope for a guitar that was $5,000. So the answer is yes, it really is the best playing guitar that I have and the best playing guitar that I've ever played. And I would expect that this is about the sort of the cap as far as how nice a guitar can feel to play. But here's where the argument of diminishing returns comes in, because on the other hand, I have a white Gibson Les Paul Studio that you may have seen before, which that guitar, I think I got that one when it was about a year past its model year, but I still bought it brand new from Guitar Center. And at that time, I think I paid like $1,100 for that. So you're talking about $1,100 versus $5,100. So there's a $4,000 difference between those two guitars. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that this is 5 times the price of that Studio for what I paid for that. Now, to be fair, Studios are now $1,500, $1,600, but let's even call it 4 times the price. Okay, so are you getting a guitar that's 4 times better than a Studio? No. Hands down, it's not 4 times better. I mean, in fact, that Studio and this Custom have the same pickups. The Studio has modern PCB electronics. This has traditional electronics, traditional wiring, but it has the same pickups. They have very similar body construction, being a Gibson Custom versus Gibson USA. So as far as technical differences between a Gibson USA studio, for instance, and a custom. As far as the way they're constructed, they're very similar. They're Les Pauls. A Gibson USA guitar is going to have typically multiple pieces for the back, let's just say, whereas a Gibson Custom, not that you can see there's any wood grain on here because it's painted, but this is going to have a one-piece back. So all the width, all the way across is one piece of mahogany. It's going to have a two-piece top, one-piece neck, which a USA model is going to have a two-piece top and a one-piece neck as well. They're going to have similar tuners, similar hardware. A custom shop instrument these days is going to have a long neck tenon, so this is going to have technically potentially better sustain than a USA model. Although, I mean, if I compare this to my white studio that has a Grenadillo fretboard, and that thing sustains like a monster, so it's really kind of a toss-up. So as far as the actual sound of the guitars, I think largely due to the fretboard, that having such a unique Grenadillo fretboard and this one just being ebony, there's some large differences in how they sound, although they both sound monstrously good. It's probably a toss-up to me, even as far as like if I were to shoot them out one to the other, which maybe I should do that as a video at some point. And then of course the visual appointments on a custom versus a studio, you don't get any binding or anything like that on a studio. You get acrylic inlays versus this has actual mother of pearl inlays, which I just realized is actual seashells, which is kind of weird. I just learned that the other day. But anyway, so there's a lot more attention to detail, obviously, put into a guitar at a $5,000 price point from the same brand, essentially, although they call Gibson Custom its own brand, but it's Gibson still. There's a lot more attention to detail than there is on a studio, which you would hope there would be. But is it 4 times as much? I mean, that's kind of up for debate. You know, is it 4 times as playable? No, but I mean, that studio to me is very playable, and I would put that up against 98% of all other guitars as far as playability. This I would put up against literally anything. I mean, this is the best playing guitar as far as how the neck feels and just how compliant it feels while still having a pretty good chunk to it. And that's, I think, where the difference is. So if I had to really put a number on it, a Gibson USA versus a Gibson Custom, at 4 times the price, you're definitely not getting 4 times the playability or the sound. Arguably, you're getting 4 times the visual appointments and the attention to detail, but that's not necessarily the biggest thing that I look for in a guitar. But you're probably getting, I mean, to be generous, I would say a 10% improvement in terms of playability, which that might even be a stretch. I mean, it might be less than 10% better. So, I mean, at this point, you're kind of splitting hairs. So it might just be, I mean, let's just say it's safely a 5% improvement. So there's a guitar that was $1,100 versus $5,100. And rather than being 5 times more playable, it's 5% more playable. That's probably fair to say. Now, at this point, a lot of people are going to say that's totally ridiculous. You know, 5 times as much money for 5% improvement is not worth it. I would never spend that. And to that, I would say that's totally fine. But here's the other side to that argument. There's no real other way, when you start getting into the level of thousands of dollars on guitars, there's no other way to get any improvement except to spend way more and more money. So if you sort of sit at the level between $1,500 to $2,500, $3,000 for like a USA model, you're basically at that level of playability, at that level of quality, and it's gonna, you know, destroy most other guitars that are just either entry level or mid level or whatever. For whatever people want to say, it will destroy them as far as playability and sound. But then to go up at all from there the money that is required is way higher. So, I mean, even from a Les Paul Standard to this, you're spending double at this point. So you'd be spending double for a 5% improvement as far as fit and finish of the frets and the playability and just how smooth it is. Is that worth it? I would say it's only worth it if you are really a focused player and you have the money to spend on that, obviously. I mean, a lot of people are going to say they would rather have 2 standards or they'd rather have 4 or 5 studios. I mean, if you bought used studios, you could get like 6 or 7 guitars for the price of this, even as far as a USA made Gibson. But in conclusion, my opinion is, for me, it's worth having this guitar. For $5,100, it was worth buying. I've played it for 6 months and it's the best playing guitar combined with one of the best sounding guitars that I really couldn't ask for anything better. I've been thinking about getting another Gibson custom guitar, although I don't know at what point I would do that, but I mean, it's been in my mind because this is so good that I have a handful of other really good Gibson USA models, and I mean, they are definitely outshined by this guitar. Even if it's only a 5 or 10% outshined, that's the difference. I mean, so I guess my point of this is, if you have the money to spend, if you've ever felt like it would be possibly worth having something at that level, if you've ever dreamed of having something at that level, there's a reason why they're able to charge that much for it. I will say that. I mean, it's not just a bunch of like, you know, dentists and lawyers and people that everyone says, oh, Gibson customers are just a bunch of like retired doctors and lawyers and they just have all this money to throw around. I don't really have money to throw around, but I bought this guitar for $5,100 because I was compelled to have that nice of a quality guitar, and everyone's going to have their own threshold for something like that. So it's basically, is it the best guitar when you get into that price range? Is it the best guitar that you're ever going to find around? Yeah, probably. That's why they can charge that much for it. Is it 4 or 5 times better than a $1,000 guitar? Definitely not. So it's just a matter of at what point is it worth it to you as a player and as far as financially. And now that I've had this discussion, I am definitely leaning more towards recording a comparison between my white studio and the custom, just as far as how they sound, because it would only really be fair if the studio had an ebony fretboard as well, which it doesn't, but I think it would be definitely interesting to hear because they do have the same pickups. They're both USA made Gibsons, although this one's a custom shop, and it would be interesting for me to hear the difference because I do maintain that studio sounds killer. I mean, I would put it up against anything. I would put it up against this, so I think I will. So stay tuned for that at some point in the future. If you like this video, don't forget to share it and subscribe, turn on notifications, and I will see you guys next time.